Why is no one sitting in the front row? There's space in the front row, back row team. Oh, got it. There's space over here. Ready? Okay, I think we're ready to go. I'm definitely getting a thumbs up from the back of the room here. Welcome, everyone, to this really important conversation. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you all. As the Global Chief Growth Officer for Deloitte, my vision is to bring the very best of our firm across all businesses, geographies, industries, and sectors, and to help clients achieve their vision. One of the priority areas of how we do that is through our sustainability and climate offering, which has been running for some time. It spans all our businesses, it spans all our industries and sectors, and it really does focus on our clients' most pressing needs. And in particular, it'll come as no surprise that decarbonisation is top of mind when we speak to our clients, and therefore top of mind for us in our sustainability and climate offering. Just in the past year alone, we've spent time helping our clients develop sustainable action plans in how they're going to achieve net zero. We use Deloitte's Green Light solution for decarbonisation, and we bring together our technology ecosystems, many of our alliance partners, and the greater industries in which we operate and play. But we know there's a lot more work to be done. Net zero commitments are critical, but we also know that these are incredibly hard to achieve, and there are significant challenges to achieving them. And those of you that might have seen our recent thought leadership piece, Pathways to Decarbonisation, it talks about the real challenges organisations face, both from a cultural perspective, but a cost perspective, upgrading technology, creating new business models, and developing a different operational mindset. We know those challenges can only be met by collaboration, innovation, and partnership, regardless of industry. And I'll kind of continue to say that. This is going to be genuinely a team game, and everybody needs to be involved. And events like COP28 give us the chance to have those discussions. So all the insights we're going to hear from this diverse panel will contribute to this ongoing dialogue across technology, across talent, approaches to how we drive organisation change. And on that note, I am really pleased to hand over to my colleague, Stanley Porter. Stanley is our global energy resources and industrials leader. He is everywhere all the time. He is very present in working with our clients across many geographies and in market. And I'm sure Stanley is going to have a very interesting conversation with our panel, and a big thank you to our panelists for joining us. So with that, Stanley, over to you.
Thank you, Vimy. So really appreciate not only our panel. Our panels are some of our most endeared clients. So thank you for joining the panel. Thank you for being a partner, but also thank you for being a partner in this topic, which is the energy transition. And so, I won't go too deep on the background of the topic, but here a few things we've heard in regards to the supply side, the demand side, tripling of renewables. But we put a panel together with the organizations that are at the heart of decarbonization. And what we want to talk about and focus in on are the technologies in regards to not only digital technologies, which around energy efficiency and the like, but also the technologies then that we have been talking about on the supply side that really kind of get to how do you decarbonize hard to abate industries, but also how do we find solutions that scale? So we're going to challenge our panel to kind of give us a purview into what their organization is doing and their perspectives, particularly around those two issues of the technologies that will get us there, and then also those that will scale to solve this very complex problem. But before starting, I would like for each of our panelists to introduce themselves and a bit of kind of their perspectives and how their company plays into this topic. Arlene?
Thank you so much, and thanks for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is Arlene Strom, and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at Suncor Energy. Suncor is a Canadian company operating largely in the oil sands. We also have interests in offshore oil and gas in Canada, as well as fully integrated business through refining and and a gas station network, et cetera. So we're deeply involved in decarbonizing right now. We have set ambitious goals around net zero by 2050, and we're looking at what that takes. And so in order to do that, we're collaborating with our peers. And I can talk more about that later, but the Pathways Alliance is the name of the collaboration. 6 companies responsible for 95% of the emissions and production in the oil sands. It's about 12 to 13% of Canada's emissions. So that's the challenge, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Stanley, thank you for inviting us to you and Deloitte. My name is K.R. Sridhar. I'm the founder and CEO of Bloom Energy. And what we do is, look, if you think about decarbonization in the world, when we went from landline telephones to cell phones, we didn't tell the rest of the world why they should switch. It was a better mousetrap. It did the job better. We need those technologies. So we are in the business of developing those technologies that help the transition today and also provide the energy abundance of the future without compromising sustainability. So we work on taking the cleanest of fossil fuels, natural gas, and lowering its carbon footprint to provide the maximum amount of electricity on site. We also have a technology to carbon capture, because a ton of carbon captured today is more precious than 2 tons captured down the line. We are also working on hydrogen electrolyzers, so one day there can be abundance with renewable fuels. So we are working on all the technologies, so rather than lecture to the rest of the world why they should switch, we give them a better mousetrap, then they'll automatically switch.
Thanks very much. My name is Peter Herwig. I'm the CEO of Schneider Electric. When we talk about our company's purpose, we want to enable everybody to get the most out of the resources and energy that is available in order to bridge progress and sustainability for all. And in order to achieve that, we have a simple equation. Sustainability is equal electrification plus digitization. Why am I saying that? Electricity is the most efficient secondary form of energy that is out there. And you can only achieve that in complex networks if you digitize them in total. Now, that's on the technology side, but can we have a little bit less? I think I have some... but in the sentence is also we want to bridge progress and sustainability for all. Today we have 8 billion people on the planet. By 2050, it's going to be 10 billion people. The additional 2 billion people are going to be in places that are not equal to where I live, for example, in the center of Europe. So we need to bring 2 billion people into the energy equation. Today, out of the 8 billion people, we have roughly 2 billion people that don't have access to reliable energy. 800 million don't have access to energy at all. Energy is the passport for a decent life. So if you think about it, there are 4 billion people we need to worry about in the next 26 years. And 70% of those will move to cities. That means we will need to bring 2.5 billion people into cities. We will build one China and one Europe in the next 25 years to host all of those people. It needs to be done electric, it needs to be digitized in order to do it in the most sustainable way, and that's the purpose of the company and the mission.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. My name is Juan Ignacio Rubiolo. I'm currently the Executive Vice President and President of Infrastructure of AES. AES is an American renewable leading company. We are a global company. We have presence in more than 14 countries. Our main purpose and mission is basically to accelerate the future of energy, as we call it, which has to do with leading the transition of every market where we are in, right? So at the end, our portfolio is, as we speak, roughly 35 gigawatts of installed capacity. We have another 10 gigawatts in the backlog So we've been transitioning the different markets, depending, of course, of the natural resources of each of them. But I think that our goal here is basically, or has been, to make sure we can really accompany our markets and our stakeholders in order to transition their matrices, and at the same time, making sure that our customers can achieve their sustainability goals, as that we know that most of them, if not all, they have crystal clear goals, especially in the short and midterm.
So, and maybe we get to this time value of carbon. The IEA says we have 65% of the technologies we need today to tackle this problem today. So do we focus on the 65, or do we need to focus on the 35%? And given that each of your organizations, even the Alliance Pathway that's double-clicking on CCUS, can you each speak to the technology today that you think will have the biggest impact on this topic? And then your opinion on, is it the 65 or 35 we should focus in on? Arlene, if we start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have is an urgent challenge and an imperative to action right away. So I think we have to focus on the 65% that exists right now. We have to focus on the implementation of that technology. And so for us, we have declared together, those 6 companies, that we are working on an ambition to reduce our emissions by 22 megatons by 2030. So about 12 megatons of that is in carbon capture, and the rest of it is in other technologies. So we're looking at solvent technology, which we're working on. We've got pilot projects in place. We're working at making that as efficient as possible. We're looking at energy efficiency projects, which should be the low-hanging fruit, where we can work to get megatons out. We're looking at fuel switching right now at Suncor. We're building a cogen facility, switching to natural gas from burning coke, which takes a megaton out of our operations. That will be, we're aiming to have that in service next year. So those are the things that I think are really important that we focus on now. We have that technology, we can implement it, and if we work together with those companies, we can speed the rate of implementation significantly by jointly building the infrastructure we need. And just to give you a sense of this, on the carbon capture piece, one of the things that we have with our industry is intensive streams of GHG. Well, those intensive streams of GHG also make carbon capture more economic and more implementable quickly, and they're close to one another. So we know where the streams are, we can get at them. And then I'll just, on the last part of your question, I think we have to be fast followers. We have to follow on the technologies, the 35%, whether it's small modular nuclear. I was on a panel earlier today with somebody who's working on fusion and says that's going to be ready by the mid-2030s. So that's pretty cool. So those are a couple things that I think we need to follow.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would agree with what you said about decarbonization when you started your whole conversation. Look, if you take, there's one atmosphere, it's a sink, 1,500 gigatons is what we have. Projections are you have 500 more gigatons you can put in, total of 2,000, beyond which, climate becomes more of a crisis than it already is. So if you take that and consider that 40 to 50 gigatons is what we are putting out every year as we sit, you got less than 10 years, if that's the number you want to meet. So we have to figure out a way to remove carbon from the atmosphere. And that's going to take all of the above. It's going to take what you're doing at Suncor. It's going to take the efficiency standards that we need to do to reduce what we do. But it is going to take putting renewables as fast and furiously as we can. It's also going to take conventional technology to figure out how to not put carbon into the atmosphere but into the ground. Because all the carbon that we talked about, even at 2,000 gigatons in the atmosphere, is less than 1/8,000th of the carbon that's in the ground.
So, let me start off with the original question: is it the 65% or the 35%? Simply saying, if you have a choice, take both. I think to put it a little bit into perspective, I want to divide the equation on the supply side, energy supply side, and also the demand side. The supply side meaning how do we generate energy. And one needs to look what is all in progress today, what's going to be built today. Whatever is going to be built today is going to be in operations in 25 years from now, because you don't put assets out that cost $1 billion or $2 billion, and then 3 years later you shut them down. So we need to work on the supply side, meaning as much renewable as possible. Actually, whatever we put out, we should be as far as we can net zero, and we need to decarbonize what's there on the energy generation side. And I can talk about this in great detail, but I want to focus on the demand side because we need to understand where is the energy used that is generated and where is it sometimes also generated, the CO2. 81% of the CO2 that is generated today is related to energy. 37% of the 81 is in buildings, 33% in industrial plants, 23% in transportation, and 6% is others. So the biggest contributors are buildings. Buildings. And remember what I said earlier, we need to bring these 2.5 billion people into cities. We need to build buildings. Now, if you look at a building today, a highly efficient building that comes into the market, the technology is 10 years old. Why is that? Because when the building goes into operation, it was planned 5 to 7 years before. The technology was already available 3 years earlier because nobody takes the latest and greatest and puts it in. They want to have some. So, 8 to 10 years, technology is already out when it is used today. We need to get our act together in driving efficiency and take out CO2 out of buildings. And then also industry and in transportation. And I can speak about all of them. Let me take a short deep dive into one building that, it can be our own building, and we have plenty of them that were built many, many years ago. So we go in, we put sensors in. We put sensors in to understand how many people are in the meeting room. We put booking systems in, so we understand how many people will at a certain point in time be in the meeting room. Everybody will generate heat, so we know exactly how in colder atmosphere, how we need to drive down the heating system, or in hotter geographies, how are we driving up air conditioning. Now you can say, oh, this is all small. I can tell you that we are saving 15, 20, 25% of energy used in buildings. Now, the challenge is that you need to do this millions of times in buildings, number one. And secondly, it is very difficult for a politician to go out and saying, here is $1 billion check, and you build a wind farm. That always sounds cool. You can cut the ribbon. It's much more difficult in the buildings. It is even more difficult when you go into industrial sites. We're doing actually quite some work with the Suncor together. And it's possible. It's hard work, and we need to speak very concrete all the way to the ground, even on a CEO level. Otherwise, we're not getting the job done.
Yeah, I think we share the view that we need all of the above kind of approach, right? However, I think when you see the exponential growth that we expect through 2030, 2035. What we produce today in terms of minerals and other stuffs is not sufficed in order to be able to produce the amount of equipment and devices that we're going to need for that to achieve that milestone. So that's why the 35% should play a big role and should play it fast, because we're gonna need to be much more efficient and more sustainable in the way we produce minerals and the way we deploy those minerals and refine those minerals in order to produce this amount of equipment, devices that we're going to need in order to deploy this massive amount of renewable energy in our case, right? I think that I concur as well that planning is going to be key. We are seeing that in order to be fast, few countries are perhaps trying to leapfrog certain processes and might end up with stranded assets in the midterm. So that's why planning today is perhaps much more important or relevant than in the past. And that's something that we are seeing that that is going to be key and perhaps front and center shortly with the different decision makers. And then when it comes to technology, we are a big integrator of these different technologies. And I think what is important as well is that there's a point where the regulators and the decision makers, they're going to need to decide, because it's not just about deploying a technology. Every single technology will act or operate in a sort of an ecosystem, right? And here, at least our experience on the renewable side, is that the social license, as it's called, is going to be crucial in order to deploy X or Y technology. So it's not just about talking, about different technologies, which is better and how we can, integrate them. It's going to be as well a discussion with society. What kind of technologies they're going to, accept or not. And it's going to be up to us to let them know how the different technologies work and why, X or Z technology is good for them and for the communities and societies. So that's why, SMR is going to play a role, no doubt. We have in the industry, as you know, renewables solve 50% of the problem, which is the energy component. But there's a capacity component, which is basically what is called the dispatchable energy. That is still, the big question mark, because it's easy to, or we found a way to resolve the energy side, but we haven't found a way yet to resolve the capacity side, the firm capacity side. And that has to do with, hopefully, SMR. Green hydrogen will play a role as well, replacing or combining it with natural gas. So we are developing different technologies and trying to integrate them in order to see where we can improve, very fast the capacity side of the equation. So I think, again, technology is going to play a role, no doubt. The 35% is going to be needed, right? But we need to make sure that we can deploy the 65 plus the 35 in every market where we do business, right?
So I would like to add the following, very good comments. And what you heard there is really, there's a Cambridge study. It says, from innovation to full-scale commercialization of any energy technology, the median time is 40 years so far. The median time is 40 years. That means half of them are more than 40 years. Let's all be optimists. Let's all be optimists on technology and say it gets cut down to 20 years. We don't have 20 years. That means you have to work on the 65%. It's not an option. You have to. On top of that, we need to innovate like crazy and figure out permitting regulatory issues like you talked about and the building you talked about, and be willing to take risks with new technology faster than we ever took before. So that's the 35%. And better cannot be the enemy of good.
If I can add something to the faster, which I wholeheartedly agree, and we cannot wait until new stuff comes while we do that. So we've worked with the IEA and 80 government officials, 40 CEOs in Versailles this summer, and we looked actually at existing technology and what needs to be done. The problem at the moment is, and I stick with the buildings, we can do the same in factories. The renewal rate that we currently have is 0.5% per year, and we need to renew 75% of the buildings. So in my simple calculation, it only takes us 150 years to do it if we continue to do it at this speed, and technology is available. So we need to go 10 times faster. And we've come up with, other companies and so forth. We said, here are the 10 actions. If we're implementing them, if we're getting some, also tailwind with policies in the different countries to go 10 times faster. Sometimes the payback period for what I said earlier, 3 years. Why wouldn't anybody do it? We need to bring the knowledge out there. My big petitum is help
help us in bringing that knowledge out to people, that we go and that we decarbonize. Technology is there.
So, we talked about speed. You touched a little bit on scale. So we need to talk about money. If these are very big solutions, very big problems, and we can start with the Pathways Alliance. So if the estimate is somewhere between I think it's 4 trillion to 7 trillion annually to solve this problem, what are the frameworks that allowed speed and frankly allow either the capital certainty for companies and governments with stakeholders or incentives? So can you just speak to the frameworks that are needed to accelerate and scale some of the solutions you're talking about?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, the issue is significantly complex, but I'll start with the fiscal framework. What we're looking for at the Pathways Alliance is incentives to help us on the capital side that are competitive with what's happening in the rest of the world. So when we think about our industry and that it's a global commodity and that we're competing for capital, some of our companies are multinational, we want to be competitive. And so in Canada, we're encouraged. We've been collaborating with both the federal government and the provincial government. We already have, the federal government has announced a 50% investment tax credit for carbon capture until 2030. It decreases by half after 2030, so there's some urgency in there. The provincial government has come to the table as well. They've announced a 12.5% credit to build carbon capture. So those are a couple of the pieces that we've got there. But there's more than just the fiscal framework. We've got the complexity of the regulatory framework to deal with. And we are looking at getting applications in, but we are working on consultation with Indigenous communities, which is really important. They need to understand that this is safe and feel comfortable with the project going forward. There's economic participation with Indigenous communities. There's opportunities there, but all of that takes time and collaboration. And then there's the labor and the skills to actually build the project. And so all of these pieces are what we're working on and getting it together, but it's with the urgency that you've talked about, this is why collaboration is so important. We need to continue to work closely with the federal government, the provincial government, and our colleagues to ensure that we're meeting our timelines. For us, if we want to meet this goal of 2030, we have to make progress in 2024. We can't just continue to do the pre-feed and the feed engineering. We actually have to start making additional progress. So we're doing everything we can to be ready, but those are a few of the challenges that we're facing.
My view is very simple. Disruptions are driven by consumers, and consumers will make choices. They will, to a certain extent, just not accept that products have a large CO2 footprint and so forth. So as corporates, we need to prepare at full speed. Now, I've talked what we do with clients. Let me also talk what we're doing ourselves. And it's, I understand it's complicated. You have a scope 3 that is upstream, you have a scope 3 that is downstream, and you have a scope 1 and scope 2, so the CO2 that you're putting out there by yourself. We've given commitment that in 2025, we're carbon neutral, 2030 net zero in the own supply chain, and we're thinking about how we can pull this in. Now, this will require a couple $100 million of investment. 3 weeks ago, I had my capital markets day. I'm standing in front of the investors, and I say, in the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to put out $2 billion of capex, and $400 million of that is related that we're going to meet our net zero targets. And you know what? It brings clients to us. Because the user ultimately, my belief, the consumer will decide from that perspective, you know, I'm happy to get preferential policies. Frankly speaking, I need to make it work despite the policies. I cannot wait. We have to go. Now, if you go to the more complicated, and I understand this is only 1% of our CO2 footprint, if I go into the upstream, we've looked at 1,000 suppliers, top suppliers. So we go to the suppliers. What we've learned, we go there with our consulting practice. We work with them. We bring in our technology. We digitize. We drive down their CO2 footprint. We've committed until 2025 that for the 1,000 suppliers, we reduce their CO2 footprint by 50%. This year, at the moment, we're at 24%. We started in 21, which was a challenge year with COVID, as you remember. So we're going to get there, 50% of the top 1,000 suppliers. So some of them are getting excited about saying, this is really great. And now they start forming coalitions. One of the coalitions we've started is in the semiconductor space. Today, I think we announced that also AMS, Google, and HP joined the coalition that we started off with Intel and somebody else. So they start now sharing technology and possibilities that are there to drive down CO2 footprint. And I think that's what we need to do. We start from a very practical example, we bring it to our suppliers, we bring it to industries to change it.
Can I just add one thing before? As I talked about the complexity, I don't want to give you the impression that that's a reason to slow down. We've been at this for about 3 years now, and already we've spent we've got 3 phases of our plan. So the first phase, as I said, is the 22 megatons. We have a phase 2 plan and a phase 3 plan so that we can get to the net zero target. We've already spent about $1.8 billion since we've been collaborating. So we're not standing still. We realize the urgency to get moving on this.
I think, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. The issue with I think most of us are in the 30-year or more, investment industry, right? So at the end, every penny we invest this, in any market, we need to make sure that in 20 years at least, we're gonna have a solution that will prevail, right? So. Saying that, I think that this perhaps going to the basics, but especially when it comes to new technologies, right? We need to provide or to find the frameworks able to provide certainty and clarity on their own run, right? This is what we are trying to combat here, which is basically climate change. It's something not new for us, but will take time in the sense of maturing technologies and making sure we can really finance them down the road. So I think financing or getting to certain scale will require certain rules and regulations being able to promote them in their own run. And for instance, electrolyzers, green hydrogens, SMRs, those kind of new technologies are going to be key post 2030 most likely. We need to debate the regulatory frameworks for those technologies today. We cannot wait for 2030 to start discussing them, and that has to do again going back to I'm a firm advocate for the planning processes, because now for the decision makers, especially for regulators and the ISOs and those who are involved in designing and defining the future of networks, the grids, they're going to have a much more difficult challenge coming from this need of integration, of integrating all these technologies from the demand side all the way down to the supply side. So we're going to have much more interconnected networks, smart grids, new technologies, real-time, I would say, devices that they're going to communicate each other. So that was not, 5 years ago, even less, 20 years ago, when we designed our grids. So now we need to shift completely into a new paradigm of how we deal with energy as a whole, not just the traditional generation, transmission, and distribution. Now it's all together, interconnected, incorporating new technologies. So I think that in order to get it done, having stable frameworks, much more modernized, and learning from best practices, not trying to reinvent the wheel in every single market, will help us to accelerate this path to what and achieve our goals. Yeah.
So for us, I think about subsidy and incentive very, very differently. We need to incentivize the right behavior, which is decarbonization, which means outcome-based policies rather than a subsidy for a technology. That's number one. How do we think about our own investments? About 20 years ago, we had a hydrogen electrolyzer. We had done the technology for it. We chose not to commercialize it because even if there were subsidies, it was not commercially viable for the long term because renewables were $300 a megawatt hour, not less than $30 a megawatt hour. It changes. Last year, we started doing it, not because the subsidy came. The subsidy is an accelerator, but we cannot subsidize our way out of climate change. We have to create technologies that are economically viable. So that's how we think about investment. It needs to be a smart investment that returns money for a company while doing good. And the doing good can be incentivized by outcome-based policy that is there for the long term.
So each of you, and as we gathered for 15 minutes, it seems like you're doing business with her, you're doing business with him. So collaboration is necessary. But as and very serious, does industry have to pick and choose? Do certain segments, certain players have to pick and choose in order to collaborate to scale any of the solutions we talked about? Because right now, it is the perspective that each of you are, and the companies not in the room, are trying. But we're trying many things. Can you just give your perspective that somehow, do we need a different construct, commercial side, to pick and choose? Are there competitive threats to that? Like, if we just focus on collaboration to scale, can you just talk about how we address that?
I can start. Well, I think that I think you have a great point actually, because everybody wants to have at least a serious discussion on our case on renewables, right? And the way we have strategized the discussion is basically we focus in 4 key segments, which are what we call them, the hardest to decarbonize, right? Which are basically the high tech, due to the data centers and the amount of energy that they produce, that they need today, and they're going to need exponentially in the next decade. Oil and gas, C&Is, which is for us commercial and heavy industries, and utilities in general, right? Especially in the US. But I think, just an example of I think you hit the point where I think in the past we used to just sell our electrons, our energy to our customers in a sort of a bilateral way, right? They have a need, we have a solution, we just enter into a contract and that's it. Today we are co-developing solutions with them because what they need is much more sophisticated than what they needed in the past. An example of that is that we are the largest, I would say, seller or supplier of Amazon, and we are developing. We develop actually with Google what we call it 24/7 solution, which was the first solution to provide renewable energy on an hourly basis to Google. We developed that with them, right? They had a need. We had the know-how on how to do it. We put the teams together for a couple of years, 2 to 3 years. These are not short-term solutions, and we ended up with that product. Now it's kind of the premium product in the US, right? And the other guys followed. Same thing we did with the cement company, where we are working with them together in order to find solutions that would allow them to really decarbonize their processes, especially trying to replace pet coke and coke, coal they're using in their facilities. So I think that the way we deal with customers nowadays is much more definitely different than in the past, and we require much more, I would say, partnerships beyond just the bilateral relationship. because now we need to integrate same thing, new technologies, and we need to make sure that whatever we develop is really considering what's next for our customers. So when Google or Amazon, they think about the new data centers, they usually, in the past, they just thought those plans on their own. Nowadays, they share their plans with us. That's an example, right? In order to figure out what's the best energy solution that would have the least impact to them, and of course to the global scenario, right? So at the end, that's where we find that collaboration, partnerships, integrating different expertises is gonna be the case going forward.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the model of collaboration requires a different level of intensity as well. So, when I think about the Pathways Alliance, the CEOs of these 6 companies meet every Friday morning for the last 3 years. They have been allocating time. So when you think of your time and how valuable that is and all the things on your list, like that's a big commitment. And I think as the next level down, the group, the steering committee that I'm a part of, we're talking almost every day, like at least 3 times a week. We're collaborating, aligning interests. It's hard work too. You have to figure out where you're going to compete, where your interests are different, and where we can speed the rate of implementation by collaborating versus competing.
Peter, can you touch a little bit, given Schneider is pretty prolific across this space in just buildings, infrastructure, energy, and now you're moving software into the software. Can you just touch a little bit on the mindset on competition? Is that going to kind of impede some of the collaborations you need to scale?
And I come to the technology software, which is, I think, important to understand. Everybody uses a lot of software every day on your mobile phone. You have software of, I don't know how many applications you use of a lot of different companies. They're working on one platform, whether you like it or not. So, as a business leader, I'm always, I think practical work brings prosperity. So I want to give you some practical examples how we've been working together with a client who was partially a partner and in some areas a competitor. Capgemini, it's public, so I can talk about it. They have more than 100,000 people in India and host 6 different campuses in India. And so they come to us and say, can you help us drive sustainability agenda forward? Yeah. So we've built what they call an energy control center. It has our software in it. It has the software from Carrier. Carrier is one of the HVAC suppliers, well known. Capgemini has built some software. They have done the integration. Now, if I were to go to my development folks, they would say, we can do all of that. I said, yes, great. Let's focus on the things we're good at and let them focus on the things they're good at. So we've in the first year of operation, we've taken out 24% of the energy consumption of their 6 campuses in India. In the second year, we added another 15% when they became pro-efficient in using it. So we've chopped off almost, simple calculation, we chopped off 40% of the energy bill. If you think about this. And now they said, can we do this globally? So I speak with the CEO, we're meeting in January, and we're gonna talk to a bunch of clients where we're saying, hey, there's a joint solution that we've built. So it's software from them, it's software from us, they do the integration, and it's gonna be great. And there may be Carrier, there may be somebody else. At the end of the day, I think it's a complex world, the problems are complex, and we need to come together with an open mind to try to resolve them.
Anything, KR?
It's fairly simple. The pie is so large, number one. The speed at which solutions are needed is so fast. We don't have time to learn. So each one of us do what we do best and find people who are best at what else they do and partner.
So, so we are at COP, so I think we all understand carbon emissions and decarbonizations vary by region, global north, global south. If we just touch on, and one of the outcomes of this COP is the loss and damage fund, but as you think about this conversation around technologies, as I think we can disproportionately focus on the markets that need to decarbonize the U.S. and is there a path, is there a different path forward for global south countries that can leapfrog? Is there a different pathway as we look at not just the developed countries? If you could just speak to, because all of you are global, can you just speak to kind of thoughts around kind of the regionalization and specifically maybe some of those that have 600 million, i.e. Africa, of the 700 million you talked about? Anyone?
So absolutely. Look, if you take that 1,500 gigatons that's already in the atmosphere, Africa has contributed to less than 40, right? So is there an obligation? Absolutely. It's, you know, that is the commons. Atmosphere is the commons, right? Is there an obligation? Absolutely. How do we solve it? Very smart people who are good intention can see it different ways, right? You can give them money to fix every disaster. That's a never-ending path. Figure out a technology that you can give them to leapfrog and also give them resilience tools before a crisis. That protects lives and that's cheaper, but it's harder to do. It's easier to give money after a disaster than to give money for resilience. We need to change those behaviors. Those are not easy to change. Very similar to the politicians and like efficiency. That's not a sexy thing to do. But that's what we have to do.
Am I on? Yeah, I'm on. Again, I think it's very, very complicated country by country, and I think it's not up to me to give great suggestions to a country where there are tens of millions of people that don't have access to energy. I can give some suggestions and I can offer some potential solutions. In particular, when we go to the poorest of the poor, where, for example, cooking today is still done with open fire. So can we offer low cost offerings where they have small solar panel that they can use, batteries that they can use on a cost-effective way, so they can actually move away from the first step from fire to electric cooking to having internet available also at night to having lights available with LEDs. So these are some works that we're doing through our foundation. That we've because we want to give access to people, we want to give access to energy to the people. I think that's where it starts. But then, as you move up the ladder, I've been talking to a gentleman today that is building a city that probably in 2040 has 10 million people live there. Today, 0. And he says, I'd like to deploy the latest of the technology. Give me the latest technology because I know I'm going to bring 10 million people into the city. They're going to be young people. They want to have everything digitized and they want to live in a sustainable place. Now, this is Northern Africa. So it's possible. Sometimes people don't have money. I talked to a bank today. They want to be an ESCO provider saying, we know the ecosystem in Africa to be able to do it. We need to engage with those people to try to find solutions and make it happen.
So we're got like 12 minutes left. I want to maybe just double click on where we started on hard to abate. So we've talked about technologies that may help the grid. We have a commitment for renewables. But if you start doing the math, because you guys have been doing a lot of math on this panel, the heat capacity factor needed for hard to abate industries that will still be needed for our growing economies. Even developing countries are going to have growth. Can you just, are we still on the right path as it pertains to the cement, the steel, chemical companies. Is there enough renewables to do it, or is this transition going to be in play for a while? Is it linked to carbon capture? Because without it, if we kind of close out on hard to abate, and then I want to kind of get your forecast for the next 5 years. Just kind of your thoughts. Are we on the right path to kind of address both?
Well, I think that that's the question that we have in the industry today, right? I think that you have two kind of set of industries. You have those who are really hard to decarbonize, the heavy industry, steel, cement, those kind of guys, because they need real high heat in order to produce their products. And then you have the other industries that are much I call it easier to decarbonize, right? Those are really they're in good shape in the way they're treating or planning their decarbonization. I think on the hard to decarbonize industry, I think that we have still there are a lot to be done, right? And that's where the new technologies should play. And my guess is will play a big role in the coming years, right? Basically, I think that what is going on with hydrogen is kind of is promising. I wouldn't say that we are out there yet, but it's kind of promising and should contribute a lot to indeed to help these industries to decarbonize. SMR is going to be another key technology. We are actually piloting them in one of our facilities in order to produce steam for one of our existing coal plants. So we're going to replace coal, or steam produced by coal through using these SMRs, for instance. So there are new technologies that will play a big role in those particular segments. However, as we speak, where we are now, it's very, very hard with the technology we have in place, right, to decarbonize them. And when it comes to renewables, I go back to my original point here, that is that when we see the amount of megawatts or gigawatts or terawatts that we need to deploy, globally speaking, because the problem we have is global, it's not just a particular region or country. We don't have enough stuff there to produce what we need. We don't have enough copper. We don't have enough lithium, right, to produce the massive amount of batteries that we're going to need in order to accommodate and integrate all these technologies. So that's perhaps to me the biggest challenge we have, because we need to figure out how to really be able to develop sustainable ways of producing more, right? If we really want to decarbonize the world, and we really want to electrify the world, right? Because at the end of the day, I think we know where we are heading to, right? And I think we are, in the right path. However, again, we go back to the speed of that transition. And there's a way, and I will connect that with your prior point, is that definitely there's a way to leapfrog in certain regions. Many technologies, many transitions. Actually, when you see, and we always debate this in Latin America, the penetration of battery systems, storage systems. We tend to try to reinvent the wheel or reinvent the regulatory framework all over again. Every time you go to a market, it tries to have its own kind of unique regulation, right? Where we know that in Europe and the US, it's already developed. And it's working. It's not perfect, like everything, but it's working. So that's our job as well. It's trying to see how we can replicate good practices much faster. And by doing that, we're going to definitely leapfrog a lot of things during this transition. If we are not able to find those kind of sweet spots, it's going to be very, very challenging to really be on the right track.
You get the hard debate, and then we do want to get, before we close out, kind of your thoughts if we're here next year, and if when we're here next year and 3 years from now, I would like to get your perspectives on what you perceive where we will be, but hard to abate.
Well, just a couple of things that I was going to, quick comments. One is on just going back to policy frameworks. Because as we think about where we're going and the policy frameworks that are required to reduce carbon, we also have to be careful that we're not layering on and getting unintended consequences. And in Calgary, I think we have, or in Calgary, Canada, we have, Calgary too, we have aligned on our ambition, and we're putting, our governments are putting new frameworks in place, but I'll give you a quick example. We have clean electricity regulations that are in draft form, and we're working to provide comments on that. But they're looking for a clean grid by 2035, which we agree is an urgent goal. But we also need to make sure that we're attacking the most intensive streams first, at the most efficient allocation of capital early on. And so I think we just have to look at how all these policy frameworks go together and whether there are unintended consequences. And then the other quick thing I was just going to say is we need to think about non-combustion uses of our product, because there's going to be lots of that, whether it's asphalt, bitumen beyond combustion, carbon fiber, how we can use these products in ways that they're not combusted.
So before round, hard to abate, or?
Yeah, no, happy to talk to the hard to abate, and I understand if we're saying, we don't have enough capacities to build. The biggest capacity we can build is efficiency that we're taking out of the current consumption. And I gave you one example with one client, 2 years, 40%. Now, if we're doing that across the road, including in the hard to abate sectors, and there is quite some solutions available where you can actually, if you run a lot of refineries, for example, if you bring the right oil into the right refinery at the right point in time, you can run this with 20% less energy. You just need to schedule it in the right way. Now, is it bad to talk about oil in refineries? Yes, but are they going to go away? Not in the foreseeable future. Will we build many new? The answer is no. So we need to make those more efficient that are there. We're working with one client. It's also public knowledge, Indian Oil, and they have a couple of 10 plus refineries, and now they're directing the oil to the right refinery, allows them to do this 20% more efficient. Now, you can say, well, this is not sufficient. 20%, if we take 20% out in total, it's humongous.
Okay, so with 1.5 minutes left, you get 30 seconds to tell us if we look. We'll start with you, Juan Ignacio. What are you most optimistic if we're here next year? Just real quick. What do you think? Where will we make the most progress?
No, I think on the technology front, no doubt. And I think that I'm perhaps very, optimistic, but I think I'm seeing a trend of the different countries, at least in the Americas, that they really understand the need of do it right and do it fast. So I'm hopeful that eventually next year or perhaps 3 years from now, we're going to see much more, successful examples of doing the right thing, and hopefully not just the developed countries, but the developing ones as well are joining the pack. Yeah.
I'm very, I'm optimistic by nature, and I want to create more follows to drive efficiency, to drive decarbonization, to drive collaboration across industries, and get our hands dirty to implement. Concrete work brings prosperity.
So I think if you just look at AI and digitization, if we look at EVs, if we look at synthetic fuels, certain sectors are asking for hard to decarbonize. And if you look at where our electricity is today, the supply-demand mismatch is going to be a big crisis. And I actually, as an optimist, like that crisis, because crisis is what force massive change very fast. We are going to have a supply crisis, and that supply crisis is going to make us do the things, like you said, a little bit faster than we ever wanted to, because electricity and energy is a lifeblood, and we need it.
And I would say that we're going to see the accountability and transparency that comes with these commitments is going to come to fruition over the next year. We can't be making these commitments without being held to account on, are we making progress? What have we done since the year before? And you're seeing that in sustainability accounting standards and all of those kinds of things that, that will hold us to account.
Right. Well, thank you, Arlene, KR, Peter, Juan Ignacio. Thank you for the comments and the insights, and thank you for joining us.